December 16th, 1773. Members of the Sons of Liberty sneak onto a ship in Boston Harbor, dumping hundreds of crates of tea overboard in protest. Or, as most pundits remember it, the last time we were cool with property destruction. Hey everyone, Brian here from The Revisionists. You did probably already know that, but I said it, so here we are. I am just jumping in because, as you will hear later on in this episode, we did not get a chance to do our plugs and wrap-up that we normally do because of some family emergencies. Everyone is okay. We just had to sort of end the recording abruptly. And so I am here to just right off the bat thank our guest, Josiah Brannaman, and tell you that he hosts the Pulp podcast. That is Pulp with an exclamation point. It is a very fun new audio fiction podcast with a lot of pulp energy, like sci-fi. If you are familiar at all with that, I think you'll really get a kick out of it. So look for that on your podcatcher of choice, or you can find them at pulp_podcast on Instagram. Zach, of course, he co-hosts also the Movie Trap podcast, which is, I believe, still taking a brief hiatus. But they have their back catalog of episodes, which are all very fun and all worth checking out. And as for me, listeners, the holidays are here. And, if you are feeling the holiday spirit, depending on, what, if anything, you are celebrating, it doesn't have to be a thing. The winter solstice is here. That's sort of our thing. But, if you are feeling generous, I just want to put in a plug for an organization here in Denver called Mutual Aid Monday. They are probably the furthest reaching mutual aid organization in the metro area, and they are trying right now, especially to make sure that people sleeping outdoors, unhoused people, have safe heat sources for their tents. So you can find them also on Instagram, and you can get instructions for donating there. I've mentioned before, I also work with our local Food Not Bombs organization, which, if you live in Denver or not, you can find one and donate money to, or donate your time, come down, cook, do distro, whatever. And yeah, so here we are. You can see this episode. This episode's a big, big boy. It's a big, beautiful, special boy. We wanted to do something special for the holiday month, and we wanted to time it to be closer to the release of the Napoleon movie directed by Ridley Scott. But here we are. It is, as we've said, hard being an adult. But we hope you really enjoy it, and we will be back with the Mexican Revolution with our next episode, The Rise of Pancho Villa, which I am super horny for this one. Okay, that's a weird energy to leave this one off at, but here we are. Welcome to The Revisionists. I'm Brian Flynn, sitting here by the fire, mug of hot cocoa, waiting for old jolly Nick Cage to come down my chimney.
I'm Zach Powers. I am enjoying my traditional secular Christmas aesthetic. I am fine adopting the wreaths and boughs and extend it no further.
Yep. Yeah. Also, sorry, I set up an improv situation without saying so beforehand, and without, frankly, fully realizing I was going to do it myself. Uh,
Yeah. I
join-
didn't know this was a Christmas themed episode because, like, I don't associate this particular person with the arrival of one Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But
Also, we're recording this in July.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. I
I'm kidding,
listeners.
that's a lie.
Yeah, well, I feel like our listeners know we have not been ahead of schedule lately. Particularly, look, we like to be of the moment. You know, we like to live in the now, go with the flow. And speaking of going with the flow, joining us for the first time, of course. Sorry, I'm going to take that again. That sucked. Speaking of going with the flow, living in the moment, being in the now, join us for the first time, the host of Pulp, a brand new audio fiction podcast. Please welcome Josiah Bannerman, please. Perfect. I mean, there is going to be a strong... Actually, no, I realize now I wrote the fiction element, so there is going to be a fiction element to the show later
Wait,
on.
hang on. I realized that I wasn't recording for that. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that
no.
again. Welcome to Pulp. Oh shit, wrong show.
Perfect.
Sorry about that. I was trying to record. I was trying to connect the Bluetooth to to my other thing so I could hear my recording. But no, never mind. Please edit that part out.
Listeners, you're joining us after a whole mess of technical issues, so we might be a little slap happy by now.
yeah.
But
And, even though it's December, by the time you're hearing this, our last episode was a Halloween episode that came out in November. It's just been we've got weddings and children, and we started this when we were like 22, and now we're in our mid-30s, and things are different.
our bodies are failing us, and but on the plus side, we all have something to celebrate this December, and that is that Henry Kissinger is still dead. So
Permanently, assumedly.
One
Look,
would hope.
I don't know what kind of deal he made with the devil, so I make no assumptions.
No, I don't either. I assumed he was permanently alive for a while there, and maybe he can renege on death.
Like he did on literally every
the devil would be like,
like he reneged on literally every treaty that he ever signed.
yeah, I was gonna say. Even the devil would be like, oh, no, wait, that's not a good. Oh, this doesn't seem like a good idea to me. Oh, man. The devil and Batman, very, very similar in a lot
They
of
both
ways.
have horns. They both fight the
Both
Joker.
very, very rich.
Yeah. Both have... Yeah, I got nothing.
Both have an arsenal of weapons in their garage.
Yes.
Yep.
Live
in a cave underground.
I'm just saying.
Damn it. Yep.
Often portrayed as suit-wearing businessmen.
Yeah.
Plenty of connections there.
Oh man, I'm trying to think if any Batman actors have portrayed the devil in a
Jack
movie.
Nicholson.
Oh, almost certainly.
Jack Nicholson.
I don't actually know.
yeah.
I'm just assuming that Jack Nicholson has.
Jack Nicholson played the Joker. He didn't play Batman.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, fuck.
Michael. It feels like Michael Keaton would have at some point, but I can't summon what it might be. Val Kilmer.
I could see Clooney doing it.
Val Kilmer may have, but it went straight to video.
I could see Christian Bale doing it. American Psycho
Basically
is
the devil.
not that
He
far.
did play Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
But Zach, why don't you let the listeners know what they're going to be in for?
This is a comedy history podcast where we talk about comedy and history, two flavors that don't generally go well together. But yeah, we're talking this particular episode about we've sort of been building up to some Mexican Revolution stuff, and I'm interested to see the flow here because this is not the connection here is not one I'm previously familiar with, because we're talking about kind of have a heavy hitter from history. One of your favorite movie stars of 2023, along with Robert J. Oppenheimer and some people who made apps who got movies made about them.
Oh, yeah.
It's Napoleon Bonaparte.
That's right.
Someone we've neglected to cover so far in all these years.
And I think there is a connection between the Mexican Revolution and I think we can make it.
There is.
I certainly hope so.
A through line between like the whole age of Atlantic revolutions that go from, the French Revolution through like Mexico and then back to Russia. But the connection is like we've been talking about doing this one for a minute, and then the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes ended. So we can talk about movies also. So there's a movie tie-in. Yeah. And there's also that as I mentioned before in the Mexican Revolution miniseries, I am very into the Mexican Revolution, and so I have been overdoing it with planning, and so this works out perfectly. But yes, we will be talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. Josiah, you'll be doing the real history. And I will be doing the alternate.
Uh-huh.
So, Josiah, whenever you are ready, take it away.
All right. I want you to picture a scene in your mind. In the theater of your mind. Mm-hmm. You're at a party. Mm-hmm. You've had maybe 2, 3, 7 drinks. Mm-hmm. You ask some stranger, name 3 battles of the Napoleonic era. Then, also being drunk and not having the capacity to think too critically, what do you think they would say?
Waterloo, and then they'd probably lose the thread.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they might either vomit into probably whatever handbag I'm using, and then... Yeah, I don't go to a lot of parties. I don't know. I don't have a lot of reference points.
I'd probably guess, Waterloo, Trafalgar, and then somebody would probably just mention Russia. Which
the whole Russia thing, which
is such an Anglo. We have a very anti-French Anglophone version of the entire era, right?
Yes.
And part of that is that you don't actually get the military brilliance of Napoleon. And now my personal interest in Napoleon, I do a lot of union organizing. So for me, all warfare is a universal language, and class warfare is no different. So studying military tactics and strategy informs strategy when you're talking about organizing workers and fighting back against bosses and capital. So, and for me, I think the Napoleonic era provides the best metaphors for that. And at the same time as learning from Napoleon's victories, you can also learn from his mistakes. That said, he was born in Corsica to minor Corsican nobility. During the time when Corsica was building towards Corsican independence from, at this time, Genoa.
Yes.
And
this was back before Italy was a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked at a map recently, but I'm pretty sure it's still under French, it's still within French borders. So
Yes.
his family sent him off to military school in Brienne, where he was. I don't get the name because I'm not French. I don't speak French, but they called him something that it was a pun on his last name that meant through the nose because he had a big nose that didn't look right. So I reject the whole Napoleon complex being related to his height. He actually was a pretty normal sized guy, but he was always pictured around his Imperial Guard, who were big ass dudes wearing bearskin fucking hats.
That's what I've been saying basically since sophomore year, because 5'7", totally normal height in the early 1800s.
Are you 5'7"?
Yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah.
So here's where I think the Napoleon complex comes in. Is he was mocked mercilessly, and dude was a fucking nerd, like an obnoxious, arrogant little know-it-all brat. They had a snow fight at school, and he built like a fort and organized its defense. It's a fucking snow fight, you dweeb! Like. You make a bunch of snowballs, you throw it at your friends, you make a team, you betray your teammate at the most hilarious moment. He starts throwing snowballs at you, everybody starts throwing snowballs at each other. That's how snowball fights work. Dude was not So I think like and come on, like if you look at all the shit he did lately, and if you think of that in the framed by his experience in school, I bet he at every single victory he was like, I bet that fucking school bully regrets that now. I'm just saying.
Absa fucking
not related to his height, but definitely not a thing.
I feel like everyone also went to at least elementary or middle school with a kid like that who was very, almost worryingly into the military. Shout out, Andy. I haven't seen you in the news, so I'll take that as a good sign.
Right.
Although, to be fair, it's a military school that he went to, so...
I throw the kid a bone. But still kind of an obnoxious brat. And you know, like... Yeah, forget it. So, here's the thing. Like, when he was growing up, there was this revolutionary leader that was working toward. He was the Corsican revolutionary of the day. He was romanticized in Britain, Pasquale Paoli, and once the revolution hits, Napoleon, he's a young adult now. He's his own man. He applies for leave to go back home, and this is the early days of the revolution, and they kind of don't give a shit. They just let him go, and he just keeps applying for an extension, and they're like, yeah, sure, go for it. And he's just like, all right, cool. He gets like embroiled in a Corsican independence civil war type thing where Paoli comes back, but he's not the revolutionary that everyone thought he was. He's kind of this liberal sellout.
Yeah.
And there's this funny story where Napoleon and his brother Joseph and Paoli go tour Paoli's old battlefields, and Napoleon lectures him on what he did wrong. Like
he is always going to be that.
He is always going to be
his whole
that
life.
Dude, and like, keep in mind at this point, Napoleon had never commanded anything in a battle yet. Like this, he had not commanded anything. Anyway, so shit.
If you've ever, like me, if you've ever worked as a barista and had someone tell you exactly how to make or exactly how you are about to fuck up the drink they ordered, you know this sort of person.
Oh, yeah.
In microcosm.
I had a neat workaround when I was a barista for that. Whenever I kind of got the vibe that they were going to give me a lecture on how to do my job, I would, like, they would be like, I'd like a latte, please. And I'd be like, all right, cool. What's a latte? And then, like, you can see the panic in their face, and then as they're explaining to me, a barista, what a latte is, you start to see acceptance just emerge in their facial expression. I they're just resigned. Like, I'm gonna have a shitty cup of coffee today. My day is ruined. I'm gonna throw this away on my way out, and I'm gonna accept whatever shit they have in the Keurig. And then
this is why. Well, it's not the only reason why, but every time I get coffee from a coffee place, my order is literally just, I want a medium drip coffee. Yep. End of story.
But here's the thing. I like to think that I've gifted them the gift of gratitude. Because after I interrupted them, I'm like, okay, I know what a latte is. What do you want? You want skinny? You want fat? You want a lot of foam? What do you want? Then all of a sudden they're grateful for whatever they get. Like, as long as it's not terrible, they're grateful for the coffee they have that day. And I think that's my contribution to their life. My great contribution to their life is one of gratitude.
It's not my reasoning is less. I think just a regular ass coffee is all you really need, in my personal opinion.
True.
But B, there are people who truly take so fucking long with their orders in those lines. Like, I know that's a 15-year-old like stand-up comedy joke, but it's like, man, you don't got to take this amount of time to tell this person all your fucking picadillos about how you want your coffee.
It's fucking coffee.
Just get a fucking cup of coffee.
I will accept.
It's one of the oldest drinks in existence. Like, just get a fucking coffee.
I will accept alternate milk, but after that, it's too much.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, so because of the revolution, there's pre-revolutionary French military was bloated with officers. Like, they had they had more nobles essentially than positions in the army. So, and the army was a way to kind of further your aristocratic career. So, because somebody's cousin is like, hey, can I get a spot in the military? And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll make you a lieutenant general, along with the 10 other we have for this fucking regiment. So when the revolution hits, all these guys just fuck off to neighboring countries. So it allowed for a vacuum for a lot of folks like Napoleon to just be like, all right, I'm just going to sit here. I'm literally rising through the ranks while I'm on vacation for 3 years. And he also had
if he was alive today, he'd be making like YouTube hustle grind set videos about like passive income, passive
promotion is exactly what this is. He also has a benefactor named Salicetti, which gets him into all sorts of like drama, but there's not enough time for that. That's a whole fucking mini series. It's like an episode of the Borgias. Like, just it's just a fucking mess. He ends up getting an assignment when the port city of Toulon revolts against the revolutionary government and turns it over to the British. For some reason, the revolutionary government wasn't happy about that, and they sent an army. And Napoleon kind of masked...
Well, to be fair, they weren't happy about a lot of things.
That is true.
Notably short-tempered.
And and disorganized. So he masterminds the retaking of Toulon, and he gets a little bit of recognition, but he also kind of squanders it. He refuses to serve in the Vendée, which is a reactionary civil war in the West.
A fucking mess. Oh,
absolute shit show. And at some point in this process, I forget when, he writes a short story that gets picked up by Augustin Robespierre. And that might have been actually why he got the assignment at Toulon. I don't remember. But that's what really, really picks up. And it's really interesting at this point because Napoleon, at this stage in his life, was a really, really ardent Jacobin. And one of the things that radicalized him was this book called I forget what it's exactly called, but it refers to the two Hades, and it basically makes a case that any colonial,
Yes.
The case, something about the two Indies, and it makes the case that the Indies should be self governing and independent. And at this point, Napoleon is all in on this, and we'll get to that later.
And I'm sure that'll be a consistent position he holds through. Well, he
till the end, till the
power.
Bitter end.
Yeah.
He'll never compromise on Haiti. So he gets an assignment in the Bureau of Topography. Fascinating stuff. But it's actually kind of interesting because this is when he studies the topography of Italy, which is gonna give him a little bit of a power up later. Yeah.
Yeah. He's investing points in Italian typography, but then he's going to unlock some special spells to cast later on.
I cast River Crossing. So he also is engaged to Desiree Clary, who breaks off the engagement because he's weird and off-putting. But here's the twist: is that her sister is married to his brother Joseph, which is awkward already. But she ends up marrying this dude Jean Bernadotte, which we'll talk about him later. But that makes for some awkward shit later. You know what? Fuck it. I'm talking about it now.
Yeah.
So Bernadotte was one of his marshals later on, and he had moments of brilliance. He was a good general, but he also had moments where he just fucked off and didn't do what he was supposed to do. And when he did that, Napoleon fucking tore him a new one every goddamn time. And he didn't really reward him when he did good. He just, when he fucked up, Napoleon ripped into him. And I'm just gonna say, it's a little suspicious that dude marries your ex and you always give him a bad performance review at work. Just saying. Also, weird turn of events, Bernadotte becomes the king of Sweden. And when at the end, when everybody's just dogpiling Napoleon, he fucks off then too. He just sometimes he just fucked off. And I gotta admire his work ethic for just taking care of his mental health. Anyway, so that's John Baptiste. Exactly. John Baptiste, whatever. They're all John Baptiste something. It's also at this time that Napoleon loses his virginity to a prostitute.
I will say, similar to the coffee thing, I have also had people who are technically above me in the work chain of command who are so relentlessly critical all the time and micromanaging, and there's fucking nothing. There's fucking nothing worse.
Yeah. And they don't even make you monarch of a Scandinavian country,
right? Yeah, it's the one guy who you have shifts with different people, but there's one guy. Yeah. One guy where every time you're with him, you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, I have to deal with all this shit.
So after he loses his virginity to a prostitute, he becomes the captain of the guard for the uprising of 13 Vendémiaire, which was kind of very subversively supported by the Allies. It was a reactionary coup against the French government at the time. Napoleon just opened fire with cannons. The reactionaries ran away, and they rewarded and arguably saved the French government from a reactionary coup. And they rewarded him with the command of the army of Italy. Right after he marries the love of his life, Josephine.
Josephine.
Oh boy. So let's introduce Josephine for a little bit. She made it through the terror because she married her husband got guillotined. Yeah. She made it through by the skin of her teeth. Her and her son, who ended up being one of Napoleon's best generals. Actually, they have a really interesting stepfather-stepson relationship. But anyway, at this point,
sometimes nepo babies work out.
Right. Yeah. and I'm not going to go too deep into their relationship, but they have this weird. They're one of those people that if you're just like, look, if y'all just had an open relationship, it'd be fine. Like, you know,
Yes.
like those people, like, guys, it's not like enough with the jealousy, enough with the possessiveness. Just like have an open relationship. It's cool. So just
You're in France,
right,
Like,
right. So Josephine, it has a notorious sexual appetite, which is a problem when Napoleon is on tour. Military campaigns.
on tour. Yeah.
And,
La Eros Tour.
so, you know, she cheats on him because she's, you know, bored and horny, and he cheats on her with revenge, and also because he's the most powerful man in Europe, and it's just this cycle of revenge cheating, and like be swingers, it's fine. But at this point, they're both so infatuated with each other that they really they weird out his officers.
Again, if you have worked in any sort of environment with other people, you know these people.
Right. Like there's a story about him and his chief of staff Berthier, and they're in the carriage together with Josephine, and him and Josephine are just like making out, and Berthier is just like sitting there awkwardly in the carriage, just like the third wheel while these people are making out. Like he's just like, this is weird, guys. And
I do not know what to
I
do.
don't know what to do. This is France, but it's not in a carriage. No one knows this in a carriage. We do it in the streets.
It smells like a horse.
So
My French is getting really out of hand.
yeah, our French is going to merge into Italian at some point. So he takes command of the army of Italy, and in this campaign, basically wins the war by himself. He splits the Austrians and Piedmontese, defeats the Piedmontese, imposes a treaty where he actually this is one parts of his brilliance. He in the treaty says, I want these two river crossings, doesn't even use them. But he knows that if it's in the treaty, the Austrians are going to guard those. So he defeats Beaulieu. I don't know why the Austrian general has a French name, but whatever. And here's the beginning of his legend, is the Battle of Lodi, where there's a bridge that's just raked by gunfire. And, you know, it's a beginning of his legend because there's a story about him carrying the flag into this withering gunfire, when really, like, he just he started the charge and they all, like, got charged after him, got shot. But it was really just like he charged enough men and won the battle. It wasn't a stunning victory. So then he besieges Mantua, and the new general, Dagobert von Wurmser, comes down. And he splits his forces between.
Oh, also a Scott Adams character, Dagobert.
right. And he splits his forces between the lake. Napoleon abandons the siege of Mantua, defeats one column, and then swings back and defeats the other. And this is we're going to call back to this in Waterloo, but this is one of his trademark moves. Also, fun fact: Napoleon III defeated an Austrian army in the wars for Italian independence at this exact site.
Interesting.
Which, if you're ever drunk at a party,
It'll get to something.
if you're ever drunk at a party talking about Napoleon, you're welcome.
Look, I'm usually drunk talking about Napoleon, but by myself. So that's.
So he goes back, resumes the siege of Mantua. Another guy, this is just like, he just keeps beating boss after boss after boss. Like, he's already defeated 3 armies. He's got his 4th. And at this point, he's running low on troops. Does another fake river crossing over a 3-day battle at the Battle of Arcole. This is where another moment where the legend of Napoleon carrying the flag across the bridge comes out. so he's got these men about to cross a bridge. Again, withering fire, and he picks up the flag and urges the men on, and they sit there. And of course, the paintings have them rushing across, following him. Didn't happen. This is a whole complicated battle, really, really interesting, but he just crosses the river downstream. Then, same. This is the final boss, Alvinci, attacks again. He stops him at Rivoli, like with. Oh, he is outmatched here. Essentially, he lets Alvinci break his line until his troops are exhausted, and then when reinforcements come, routs the enemy army. At this point, his Austrian nemesis, Prince Charles, takes command, but Charles is now outmatched, and the armies in the north are kicking ass, and Napoleon just stomps his way through to the first time he takes Vienna, and that was his first campaign in Italy. And this is the moment. Here's the thing that I love about this is the drama. In the middle of this campaign, Josephine joins him, and she's got her first lover. Napoleon's got to know, right? Everybody knows. So she's got a lover. She's cheating on him. Meanwhile, he's just 360 no-scoping the Austrians all around Italy. That is some drama right there. I'm just saying. Anyway,
truly just a guy who always on the leaderboard for the Korean League and StarCraft. His whole life, he knows exactly when to use the bait.
Right. So that ends the first coalition, but England is still in the game, right? And to fuck up England, Napoleon comes up with this idea to invade Egypt, interrupt Britain's trade with India, where I think at this point Wellington is killing Indians in the British Raj. Fuck that guy. So, and the French government at this point is like, well, this Napoleon guy is kind of we don't like him. We like him, but we don't like him. He's kind of a threat. So yeah, let's send him to Egypt. And so he tries to wage a hearts and minds campaign.
Always goes
swimmingly.
Always the thing that is possible to do.
And it's not a bad idea in this case, because Egypt at this point is run by the Mamelukes, who are just this it's the mafia, and the rank and file population don't really like them, but Napoleon routs them at the battle of the pyramids. I mean, it was close enough to the pyramids, but whatever. Really just. And he has no cavalry, and he beats them by forming most of his army in squares, which is this Napoleon. It's not strictly Napoleonic, but if your infantry forms squares, and there's usually cannons at the corners, and so the whole point of cavalry is to outflank the enemy, so they can't outflank a square, and they usually just die. And the Mamluks' armies were mostly cavalry at this time, so it was no contest. So he beats the Mamelukes. They're out of power, but nobody likes Napoleon either.
Yeah.
Which also, fun story. At this point, Napoleon, because he's waging a hearts and minds campaign, and he doesn't want the Muslim population seeing his soldiers drinking all the time, right? Yes. But they're French, so they have to do something.
Yes.
So they smoke a lot of hashish. Yeah. Napoleon's army of Egypt was high as fuck.
True to almost all military experiences on expeditionary forces, down to today.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly often difficult for people to watch mass violence every single day without some kind of crutch.
Weird how that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I have no idea where
our sponsor this episode is diet pills. Wait, what?
Yeah. You'd be surprised. Obviously, fuck them, but the rate of suicide among Nazis committing war crimes was pretty fucking high.
Yeah. Which, a little too late, but...
Yeah.
Still got... never mind. I'm going to leave that alone. Speaking of war crimes, Napoleon goes off and has a failed siege of Acre and kills a lot of civilians. Fuck that guy. And blocks an English invasion of Syria. And, this is a last-ditch effort for his Egyptian campaign because the British blew up his navy, the Battle of the Nile, and there's an interesting story where the French flagship just blows up and the battle just kind of pauses, and sailors on both sides are like, hey, we got to get these guys out. Because they were first and foremost sailors. And they're like, I mean, we'll kill each other in the battle, but this is fucked up, man. Anyway, so he also hears that... I forgot to mention that he had an affair at some point with one of his officers' wives. I forgot about that. Anyway, one of the more of this back and forth between him and Josephine. Guys, just be swingers. So he also hears about how French government is really disorganized, and because of his invasion of Egypt, the gang gets back together and the second coalition forms, and all of Europe is united against France again. Egypt was a terrible idea for so many reasons. So he takes his best officers and fucks off back to Egypt, back to France, leaves his men, leaves this hilariously bullshit message about, you have defeated the Mamelukes, you've triumphed in Syria. No, they didn't. And I will be with you in spirit. And he's gone.
It's sort of funny to me just how crass and obvious it is that he's just like pulling a Camp Krusty sort of thing.
Oh, and this expedition, because he was it was a Hearts and Minds, and he brought a bunch of academics and scholars and engineers and whatever, because this isn't colonialism, and he's not saying, oh, it's for your benefit that I'm invading you. I'm building bridges. All of these archaeologists find the Rosetta Stone, and it's in the British Museum of Plunder. National Museum, not the French, because they eventually trapped the French. I think Alexandria. Anyway, so he at the behest of, I believe, Talleyrand and Paul Barras, it takes part in the coup of Brumaire. Now, what I love about this is Napoleon understands that he's kind of the muscle man here, and it's not going to happen without him. So he negotiates that he's basically going to be the executive of this new government. And he's like, guys, if you want to do this, you're going to make me president. So he establishes the consulate, which basically makes him essentially a dictator, but it's this hybrid dictatorship republic.
There's enough kayfabe around it that, like, yeah.
And it's at this point that we kind of see the Republican vision of the revolution kind of come to a little bit of fruition because he oversees the construction of the Napoleonic Code, which is kind of why, like, a lot of these reforms are why the French Revolution started in the first place, was efficient bureaucracy. And and the Napoleonic Code kind of did that in a lot of ways. Left women completely in the dust because at the end of the day, Napoleon is an awkward little incel. But
Yes.
but it fulfills a lot of the early liberal goals of the revolution. So when Napoleon says, "I am the revolution," there is he's an enlightened despot at best, but there is a little bit of truth to that in the Napoleonic Code, as complicated as it is.
Sure.
He also ends the war of the Second Coalition by taking credit for Marengo, which is a complicated story. But I mean, yeah. it wasn't one of his best victories, but he played it off as it was. And then after winning Marengo and ending the Second Coalition, he promptly remember how we were talking about how he will never compromise his views on Haiti. He promptly goes and tries to enslave the Haitians again. By sending the dude that he marries off to his sister because he's embarrassed about how sexually liberated his sister is. Again, woman-hating incel. And they all fuck off and die because free Haiti, motherfuckers.
Oh man, like I've talked about in our Mexican Revolution series, how much I love the Mexican Revolution. Haitian is also right up there with so many of those moments because, man, a lot of people try repeatedly to fuck over Haiti and then lose and then end up winning for generations and generations.
This episode is brought to you by Revolutions Podcast.
Yes.
So, Britain. Oh, right, and then he. Because he's really top dog in France, he conducts a poll that says, "Hey, would you like me to be emperor?" And surprise, surprise, everybody's like, "Yes, we would." So he crowns himself emperor of the French, and that pisses off everybody else in Europe. And again, Britain has never signed a treaty since the beginning of the Revolutionary Wars. So they're basically bribing all. They're willing participants, but they'll take the money. He bribes like Sweden and Austria and Russia and Prussia, and this starts the War of the Third Coalition, which kind of starts by Austrian General Mack just Leroy Jenkinsing into southern Germany, and Napoleon draws him out and surrounds him, and it like takes an entire army prisoner. One of his most fantastic victories. And it's one like he screens with cavalry and does a feint retreat while coming around his back, and he tries this multiple times. He tries this again in the Russian campaign. Nobody cares. And then catches up with both the Austrians and the Russians after he takes Vienna for a second time, and sleeps in the Emperor's palace, which is pretty awesome.
That's the move,
right? Again, he's the guy in Call of Duty that like teabags you after he shoots you. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So he faces off with two other imperial armies and plays it off like he's like, guys, I really don't want to fight. Can we sign a treaty? And they're like, no, we want to fight. That's Francis of Austria. It's not the Russian one. And so he weakens his right flank where his reinforcements are coming, and the Allies take the bait, and they come off the high ground. He attacks in the middle, splits the army in two, captures half of their armies, and this battle effectively ends the Holy Roman Empire. Yes. Francis saw the writing on the wall. It was already useless anyway. But he takes a huge chunk out of the Holy Roman Empire as well, called the Confederation of the Rhine. Which, by the way, this episode is also brought to you by my cheese shop, Confederation of the Rhine. Yeah, it's
and of course also Holy Roman Empire. a lot of this would lead, you know, a few decades later to the creation of Germany as like a unified nation.
And that's going to end well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had another restaurant. It was a Greek restaurant. It didn't go well. It wasn't great, but it was the euro we deserved. You know what I'm saying?
God damn.
So Prussia's still in the game, and the campaign against Prussia is like two bad poker players, because Prussia just doesn't know what they're doing. Their army is fucking slow. Their generals are old and petty, and nobody knows where each other is. So the Battle of Jena is a fucking mess. Napoleon thinks he's fighting the French army. Or Napoleon thinks he's fighting the Prussian army, the whole Prussian army. The whole Prussian army thinks they're fighting just a little bit, and he just pushes the Prussians off the board. Just not a problem. Davout and Bernadotte are trying to come from the north, but they actually run into the entire Prussian army. And by they, I mean Davout, because Bernadotte fucks off and has a vacation.
I mean, if you're gonna pick a time to do that, that's a great time.
Right, when your buddy is
very prototype.
Yes.
Yeah, the best time to do it is when your buddy is surrounded. Right after he does that, he's like, you know what? I'm kind of bored. Portugal's still in the game, I guess, and they're not joining the continental system. And also, I don't know. I don't like Spain, who had been his ally at this time. And I do think that the Bourbon royalty in Spain really did kind of offend Napoleon's whatever Republican sensibilities he had left. Because that's the thing is don't get me wrong, Napoleon is a despotic imperial bastard, but he did kind of leave sister republics wherever he conquered, and that did usher in a series of political. I mean, that you could argue that the Napoleonic occupation in most of Europe set the stage for the revolutions of 1848. And so,
well, and there's also there's also at this time like still Bourbon restorationists, you know, even probably in France still working to get was it Louis the 18th at this time, or was it Charles the 10th? It was one of them shits, returned to the throne, and so having a Bourbon kingdom like
as an ally
right to your southwest, is a dicey proposition.
Right. But you know, Napoleon is also the guy that plays a strategy game for the battles, and
yes,
just loses the diplomacy part. And just doesn't know how to play diplomacy. One of the big things about diplomacy at the time, which I don't want to get too much into because it's boring, is that like you have to have compensation for your losses. Napoleon doesn't give a shit. He's like, no, give me half of your shit, and I'm not going to give you anything. Deal with it. So he invades Portugal, and by he I mean he sends his general too, and that doesn't end well. He also forces there's some internal strife in Spain. He takes advantage of that, forces the king to abdicate in his favor. He gives the throne to his brother Joseph, and that doesn't go over well with the Spanish people. This is arguable, and so Napoleon attempts to occupy Spain. It's this whole Spain, the Peninsular War is this entire back and forth. So he tries to occupy them. They push him mostly out. He reinvades them. at some, I can't remember if it's the beginning or the middle of his first campaign, but a French army is entirely surrounded at Bailen, and this signals to the Allies that France is weak. So Austria and Austria's back in the game. They're like, hey, we want our rooms back, and so Napoleon. There's this interesting story about the Battle of Somosierra, that there's this Spanish battery in his way, and he's got Polish lancers because Poland fucking loves Napoleon at this time. They're all in. Yeah. They love the guy. And these are liberal Polish nationalists who are like, hey, he gave us our country back, essentially. So that this
yeah.
Like the entire battle is really won by 27 Polish guys that just like Leroy Jenkins, the center of the Spanish line, and you could say it's a Napoleonic victory, but that one goes to the Polish. That's on the Polish scoreboard. So at this point, he puts his army back in the control of one of his marshals, and he fucks off back to France to invade Austria again. So I don't know much about the Battle of Eckmühl, so we're going to skip that. But he wins, and then waltzes through Austria again, or not Austria, Vienna. Well, Vienna's on Austria. Waltzes through Vienna again, and Archduke Charles, who had been modernizing his army to look like Napoleon, does a reverse Friedland from the battle that he won against Russia, traps him against the river, blows up the bridge, and to Napoleon's chagrin, he loses one of his best marshals, Marshal Lannes. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to do a call back to Battle of Eylau at this point, because this is really when you start to see the deterioration of Napoleon's army. After Eylau, like his army was never the same. Like at the start of the War of the Third Coalition, at the battles of Ulm and Austerlitz, you could argue that any one of his armies or units could go toe to toe with their counterpart in any other army in Europe. I would argue even the world except for the Maratha Confederacy, and win. At this point, it's not. He's lost a lot of his good officers. He's starting to lose some of his best marshals, and his elite troops are not as elite anymore. So he regroups, fights the Battle of Wagram, literally on the same battlefield that he lost 2 months earlier. And this is the last successful campaign, other than the mini campaign at the end, because this is when he starts. This is the beginning of the end. But for the time, he consolidates his power in Europe, and then Spain just bleeds him. This is his Vietnam. He can't end it, and he can't win it. And this is where we tie into the Mexican Revolution, because it's the inability of the Spanish monarchy to govern their colonies in South America that makes for the opening for the Bolivarian revolutions. If that happened without Napoleon's invasion, you could argue that it would not have happened for at least South America might still be staying. I doubt it. It would survive the revolutionary wave of the 60s.
It certainly would not have been independent,
right,
by the time it
wouldn't have been Bolivar.
Yeah.
Who idolized Napoleon until his coronation as emperor. Like, he was in France at the time, and while there was celebrations in the streets, he shut his windows. He was like, nah, fuck this guy. He's an emperor now.
Beethoven, similar.
Yeah. What was it? So the fifth that was supposed to be for Napoleon? And he's like, no, this ain't. This
the third.
Okay. Yeah, and he scratched his name off. And he's like, fuck this guy. So the Peninsular War is this massive back and forth. And when he beats the Austrians at Wagram, he looks at Russia and he's like, "Look, we were allies, and y'all did not back me up. What the fuck?" But this takes a while. This takes a little bit to brew, and after a while, after they're not participating in his little club, the Continental System, he's like, "Look, I got to give you a good punch in the nose." So he gives them a good punch in the nose, and it backfires and punches him in the face. And here's the thing about the Russia campaign, is that he actually won the battle of the decisive battle of the campaign. He won Borodino. He won Smolensk. I mean, it was it was a slugging match, and he just like threw all his men at the enemy until he won. But he won the campaign. It was Russia that was like, "No, we're gonna burn Moscow, and we're not gonna negotiate at all." And he's like, "Well, fuck. I guess I'll go home then." But it's winter in Russia, and that doesn't end well. So this is him circling the drain. He essentially has to raise an entire new army, which is surrounded by all the European nations except for Bernadotte, because he's taking a vacation at Leipzig. And then he takes, in 1814, he's taking his last campaign. He takes an army of basically fresh recruits, because he's had 2 armies destroyed at this point. If you ever have time, look up the 6 Days campaign. It's pretty fucking brilliant. He defeats an army of, I think, 70,000 with an army of 30,000.
Yeah, numbers like that. It's wild.
Like that campaign and the Italy campaign is Napoleon at his best. And if you ever want some tips on class warfare and you want metaphors on that, study those campaigns.
Interesting. When I look it up, the dates are February 10th to February 14th, which is less than 6 days.
Yeah, see, he did it in even less than 6 days. Overachiever. And so that this is the end. Wellington has retaken Spain, and his marshals are like, "Look, buddy, you can't. This isn't gonna go well." So they send him to Elba. This is the first time, and the Bourbon come back. But turns out they suck. Who would have thought? And he comes back, and takes over command of the shitty army that he left in 1814 in 1815, and this is the famous Waterloo campaign. He tries to do what he did in the beginning of the Italy campaign, prying apart the Prussians and the Anglo-Allied army at the battles of Courtebras and Ligny. But he doesn't do it well enough, and this is where the strategy of occupying the center doesn't work really well, because there's a lot of debate about Waterloo, whether or not Napoleon could have won it, whether if he won it he would have defeated the rest, because he had an army of 70,000, but he's up against these 2 guys. But there's another Austrian army of, I think, like hundreds of thousands. I don't know. You could argue that
it was probably never going to go great in the long run.
Right. So, I don't know. Kind of seems like a last-ditch effort of he knows it's not going to go well, but this is his chance. Like he doesn't do well sitting around. So, and we all know how Waterloo goes, right? But still, I would argue that it wasn't. Also, fuck Wellington. He wasn't that great either. But the Prussians really won that anyway. So fuck Wellington. He wasn't. It's not like he was the mastermind of Waterloo. Napoleon was really fighting an uphill battle. But even in Wellington's words, it was a damn near thing. So Napoleon gets sent off to St. Helena, one of the most remote islands in the world, because they're that terrified of him. And fun fact, on his way to liberate Chile, a certain former British admiral, Thomas Cochrane, he's on his way to Chile from Britain to take command of the Chilean Revolutionary Navy, all 3 ships, and he's like, "Hey, y'all want to pick up Napoleon on St. Helena on the way? I feel like he could help." He didn't know this at the time, but Napoleon was dead by that time. But I'd like to point that out.
You want a weekend at Bernie's, Napoleon?
Right. It's like the end of El Cid where they prop him up in the saddle. But so I'd like to use this to illustrate how the monarchies of Europe didn't like Napoleon. But there were a lot of people that saw the French Revolution and Napoleon as a product of the Revolution as a good thing. And don't get me wrong, he was an enslaving, dictatorial, probably narcissistic bastard, and terrible misogynist. But he was also a divisive figure at the time. Thomas Cochrane was one of I'd say probably the best British admiral, even over and above Nelson. And he admired Napoleon, and they had this weird mutual admiration for each other. Napoleon was like, because Cochrane was the essentially the Napoleon of the seas. He would go up against anything in a little dinghy and win. And Napoleon was like, "Fuck this guy, but god damn if he ain't good." And Cochrane was like, "Hey, I mean, we're at war, but I kind of like the Republican ideals." There was this weird mutual admiration for each other. And then Napoleon died.
Perfect.
And that was way longer than the 20 minutes I thought it would be.
No, that is okay.
I mean, it's a long story.
Yeah.
And
He's one of the most influential figures in history. In fact, I would venture to say that I think of the most influential figures of the past 300 years, Napoleon is the one that I probably... He's always been the guy that I'm like, I should know more about this guy, and I just don't.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm relatively well versed in quite a lot of both foreign and domestic figures of influence. Napoleon was always the one where, like, for some reason or another, I just didn't like. That was I've always felt like I don't know enough.
I mean, his impact is well known, but he himself is kind of overrated. Like as a dude, meh.
I even feel like the French Revolution prior to his proper reign is something I have like more knowledge about than honestly Napoleon as.
We have a hard time pinning down when the end of the French Revolution is. Is it the end of the Napoleonic era? Is it Napoleon's coronation? Is it the coup of Brumaire? Is it like at what point is and at what point is Napoleon not at what point is it revolutionary versus Napoleon, and is the Napoleonic era part of it? And that's a whole debate.
Yeah, the Reign of Terror, all that stuff. Yeah.
Thermidor, all that French shit.
Yep.
So, I have
Brian, tell your alternate and tell it relatively quickly because my AirPods are down
I have
to
a family
10%.
I have a family situation developing upstairs, so I'm gonna blow through because this is all post St. Helena. There are always rumors of another possible Napoleon sighting. Even kids, because like there was one thing Napoleon loved throughout his life, it was getting young French people killed, and so there was famous sightings, but the most famous first sighting of what people thought was Napoleon happened at Camp de l'Arc de Cristal in the south of France, and a bunch of teenagers got killed by someone who they all thought was Napoleon. And it turned out it was actually Letizia Bonaparte, Napoleon's mother. But a couple years later, it happened again. There was a killer wandering around killing young military-age French people, especially after they had sex. He was wearing like a bag over his head that was shaped like Napoleon's hat, sort of like sideways taco style.
See, even in death, he was an angering incel.
Yes,
What?
exactly.
You're getting laid? Fuck you.
This kept happening like every couple years in sequence. Like the third time, it was in 3D, which is weird. He like murdered a shopkeeper and tried to steal a hockey mask. Of course, realizing at that time that there was no safety regulations for hockey, so he kind of takes a few years off to lead a campaign to get safety equipment sort of into the rules of hockey and introduce goalie masks. Then he gets back to killing.
That's also providing the inspiration for Jason Voorhees.
Well,
Jason,
we're getting there.
Jason
We're getting there.
Voorhees is actually in
Friday
Napoleon
the
Ghost.
13th series as you don't know the Friday the 13th series as well as I do.
No, I don't think
so far
anyone
there's been references
knows.
to his mother, a burlap bag, picking up the hockey mask. That's Friday the 13th 1, 2, and 3 pretty flatly.
Yes.
Next, Tommy Jarvis is going to kill him.
Yes.
Part 5 will be an
Corey Feldman,
impersonator.
I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Of Les Deux Coris.
He'll become a zombie in part 6.
Yeah. So that's that one. And then there's one after that that is everyone says like, oh, this is the final chapter of Napoleon. There's a chapter after that. It sucks. Everyone sort of agrees it's shit.
It's not really Napoleon in that one.
No,
so
it's not. It's a
part
dude
4
pretending
is
to be.
actually Napoleon, and then in part 5, it's a guy pretending to be Napoleon.
Yes. Napoleon 6. It is Napoleon again, and it is older Corey Feldman using his magic of being utterly abused by a horrifying system of the motion picture industry.
It is not. Well, I mean, the actor isn't him.
No,
if that's
of course. The coincidence.
It's the same character, but it's not the same actor.
He does impale Napoleon's corpse with some metal, which is then struck by lightning, which, as we all know, causes you to return as a sort of demi-magical revenant.
Sure. Yeah.
That's how lightning works.
That's science. That's established science.
Yeah. It's Frankenstein rules.
Yeah. It is Frankenstein rules.
But Corey Feldman is able to lure Napoleon back to St. Helena and says he's finally home. Anyway, a telekinetic girl brings him back to life. They battle. It's actually pretty good. It's much better than I'm making it sound right now. Sorry, I have a sick kid upstairs.
The MPAA really cuts that one out.
Yeah. He takes Manhattan. He goes to hell. He chills until France has a space program, and then gets more people killed, but in space this time.
Space Napoleon.
Honestly, an underrated installment, I think.
So the question is, who's Freddy?
Frederic Kruger.
Bismarck.
Yeah, they fight, and then
I thought it'd be a historical.
Much like Napoleon III, there is a shitty reboot a few years later that's a pale imitation of the original. And that is the oh crap, there's a poop situation happening in the living room right now.
And now there's rights disputes about who gets Napoleon's film rights, and Brian Fuller is making a prequel series. So
oh shit, okay. I'm into that.
Starring with some pretty good writers on it. I forget who exactly, but I think there's a very solid writer involved in that project, and I'm very curious about what that will be.
And Brian Fuller, I'm always for.
Yeah.
But that is I am sorry, that ended up being very abbreviated version of the alternate history.
That's okay. I know Friday the 13th well enough that because I was on a Friday the 13th forum when I was in high school and early middle school. In fact, it's where while the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were in their infancy, thankfully these people were progressive, because I realized how horrific these things were when I was like 12, 13 years old, because of the people on this forum, who I'm still friends with. who live only a few blocks away from me now by pure chance. But
Nice.
but I knew that franchise well enough to understand where this was going quite quickly.
Pretty early on. Yep.
I've never seen a single movie and I'm completely confused.
December 9th, 1953. General Electric announces that all communist employees will be terminated. And now, 70 years later, none of their shit works. December 9th, 1996. Gwen Jacob is acquitted of public indecency, giving women in Ontario, Canada, the legal right to go topless in public, though other laws still mandate that one nipple be translated into French. It's so... Okay.
That's kind of dishonest because nipples are kind of in French anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like,
I mean, I assume all nudity is actually in French.
Yeah.
Or Italian.
The subtitles for all nudity in movies are in French.
Not animated nudity though.
No, that is often Japanese based on
sometimes English, American English, often
Yeah.
Japanese.
It depends on whose DeviantArt page it is. Yeah. Okay, one more. December 9th, 1531. Juan Diego receives the first vision of the Virgin of Guadalupe, heralded 2 weeks prior by the way swole Chad of Guadalupe. Okay.